The soft yellow bulbs in the university's vestibule always made everything look off-color, as if the air was always dusty. My shirt was glued to my back with sweat. Every step I took sounded out, echoing as if announcing my nervousness. I slowed at the heavy wooden doors with the old distorted glass panels, the ones where the sign above read, Comité de Evaluación. I stopped, wiped my hands nervously down my pants. From inside, short voices brusque as if people were anxious to end a delicate job quickly. I gathered myself and knocked. A chair shifted, a cough. Adelante, someone commanded. I went in. The cramped room was ringed in faded chairs. At the table sat 3 professors, all surrounded by loose papers and battered folders. My own portfolio, a plain brown case, was parked at the front edge, my name, Mateo Rodriguez, penciled neatly on a small tag. Professor Gerardo led the committee. She peered at me over her glasses, drumming one finger on the wood. Beside her, Professor Diaz watched my hands, not my face. Only Morales, youngest of the trio, gave me a quick, apologetic nod. The feeling of their collective silence swelled until my voice felt truly alone. Gerardo began with glacial heaviness. "We have reviewed your proposal." Her tone made proposal sound faintly silly. "You want to research luthiery," she said, flat-mouthed, eyebrows drawn together. "Violins, cellos, guitars, you claim Buenos Aires lacks its own tradition, so you want to invent one." She looked just past me, as if I was already part of a faded story. Diaz suppressed a half-laugh, Morales' lips pressed together. "I believe we have an opportunity," I said, forcing my voice even. "We import fine instruments or make do with cheap ones. I have designs in mind, ideas for materials, native woods, maybe indigenous motifs." "With respect," Gerardo broke in abruptly, "this isn't Cremona. You could study musicology perhaps, but building instruments, that's not a thesis discipline." She shrugged, and the gesture almost closed the case by itself. "I want to study tradition," I tried, desperate to explain. "Our policy is clear," Diaz cut in, sifting through papers. "We support research anchored in recognized fields. Luthiery is craft, vocational. It's unsuitable for graduate work on this faculty." Morales opened his mouth then closed it, visibly defeated. A pen somewhere clicked. No one attempted to soften the blow. Gerardo's final verdict fell gently. "We thank you for your enthusiasm, Mateo, but the committee cannot admit your project. Consider more traditional academic paths. Good day." I stood, my chair gave a sharp squeal. I picked up my battered case without looking at any of them and left, focusing on the flex of my own knuckles. In the hallway, the clock read 12:33. The rest of the university buzzed, but the corridor was dead quiet. After a moment, I made myself walk, passing other stressed-looking students, none of them guessing at the clenched, leaden knot inside me. I took the crowded colectivo home, rain tracking blurred patterns down the scratched window. Mothers and children, people in raincoats, kiosks humming with life, all perfectly normal, while my own world had cracked apart. When I got in, my mother was slicing bread, the sound scraping through the small apartment. My Aunt Selina shelled peas at the table beside her knitting bag. "Home early, Carino," Mommy called, not turning to look. I dropped my portfolio by the fridge, hoping nothing clattered. My sneakers were streaked with city grime. "It went how it always goes," I answered, voice dull. "They thought it was quaint." Selina swatted loose shells into the bag. "Didn't you say you fixed that guitar from the rubbish?" she said, elbowing Mommy. "If only you'd been an architect," Selina continued, not really to me, "or a lawyer like Oscar, or at least music, there's money at weddings." Mommy put the knife aside, face softening. "Try again next year," she suggested gently, "or study something practical for your father's sake." I bit back any sharpness. They saw only damaged tools, bottles of glue, my raw fingers, not the nights alone, sketching scrolls, running through diagrams online. For them, silence was failure, not patience. "Violin makers, really," Selina muttered as I left the kitchen, "and what use are violins? The city needs plumbers, not dreamers." Their words faded behind the closed door. I worked days at a carpentry shop on Cal Morno, hands burning from timber, dust gritting in my lungs. The owner, Don Carlos, let me use scraps after hours. He watched me carve a wedge of spruce down, patient as I bent it into a curve with gentle persuasion. Nights on our tiny balcony, I fashioned a workbench from crates and cardboard. Cicadas screeched. I dissected borrowed guitars from a neighbor and bought splintered mahogany and rosewood at the flea market. I worked with what I had, hunting for angles and tensions. My hands thickened. Splinters lived beneath my nails, calluses roughened each fingertip. Blood spots on my finger or thumb became routine evidence of progress. Time skipped past, 1925 closing on 30, family stopped asking. Selena visited but spoke only of her son's promotions. Mommy said little, only sighing as she shook wood shavings from laundry. My first violin was quiet, weak, almost apologetic. It cracked before the year turned. The second sounded tinny and cold. Even an uncle, not hateful, joked about its sad voice. I smiled, left the table before dessert. By my sixth guitar, something finally resonated. After months of drafting and sanding, I braced the top plate and at midnight played the first chord. It wasn't loud, but suddenly the air around me thrummed, alive. I played, exhausted but content, letting the sound thread into me. No one clapped, but for the first time I felt resolved. That night I found something solid to keep. 30 came, my hair was streaked grey. The cramped Villa Crespo apartment overflowed with wood scraps, gouges and unfinished necks. I had a tiny website, small commission jobs and at last, a glowing review on a musician forum. One day a music shop finally agreed to showcase my instruments. Little victories. A break came with Alicia Gorelli, a concert cellist. She appeared at my door one afternoon, helmet clutched, eyes unreadable. "You made this?" she asked, her fingers testing my cello's scroll. "Yes." "Careful, the varnish." She played over an hour. Her bow pulled a fullness from the cello I'd hoped for but never really heard. "It's alive," she said, almost surprised. She requested 2 more. Soon, musicians came from all over. Buenos Aires, Rosario, even Brazil and Europe. My waiting list grew, crammed in a cheap blue notebook. I moved into a sunlit studio above Corrientes. Customers sent stage photos, proud and shining, cradling my work. I sometimes watched shows from the back, an anonymous part of the crowd. A regional contest win brought enough for new tools and a working heater. I sent photos to my mother. Her reply simply, "My lindo, Matteo, take care." One day a letter landed on crisp, expensive paper, an invitation to exhibit at the university's new music conservatory symposium. They wanted me to display my work. I slipped the invitation inside my jacket pocket and let the new feeling settle, not arrogance but quiet satisfaction. 12 years later, I returned to the campus, the memory of rejection still sharp. I spent the night before at my bench, smoothing a violin scroll, feeling the wound but also pride and a rough gratitude. On symposium morning, I packed a cello, a violin and a guitar into battered cases and rolled them down gleaming, sunlit corridors in the conservatory. The room for builders was crowded. Serious luthiers, attentive students, musicians sniffing out a new sound. Near midday, the old committee sidled up, slower, older, but easily recognized. Gerardo's eyes fell on my nameplate, as if confirming it was real. Morales smiled openly. Gerardo studied my cello, searching for weakness. Diaz examined the violin's varnish. Conversation stilled nearby. They were about to move on when Alicia Gorelli, star cellist, arrived, pulling me into a hug. "The best," she announced, gesturing to my cello. "You must hear this." She sat, planted the cello between her knees and drew the bow. The first note arched through the hall, soft then swelling. She played a fragment, Piazzolla's Adio's Nonnino, both aching and hopeful. Everyone froze. Gerardo's lips parted, Diaz nodded approval, Morales' eyes shone. Alicia finished. Applause exploded. She turned to the professors. "Here's Buenos Aires luthier." Cameras flashed, students crowded my table with questions. "How do you choose the wood? How do you get that varnish?" I answered, hands calm, heart racing from something nearly like happiness. Gerardo reached out, awkward but genuine now. "Matteo, this is impressive. We were premature to dismiss you." I shook her hand, feeling the closure settle, measured and genuine, but I didn't need her apology, not really. Afterwards I escaped to the steps, pacing out a deep, cool breath. I felt stripped of old fear, grateful and simply alive. Back at my mother's apartment, nothing outside had changed. Pigeons squabbled on the stoop. Her window curtains hung just as always, faded and fluttering. As if expecting me, she opened the door before I could knock, older and grayer now. "Matteo," she said, pressing her hand to her chest. I saw the news. "Alicia, the university." She seemed lost for words. I asked, "May I come in?" And she just nodded. We sat in the kitchen, same worn tables, smells of oil and bread. Aunt Selena had moved away. I set my first real guitar on the table, nudging her to try it. She plucked a hesitant note. The sound filled the space. She touched the wood in wonder. "This is yours." "It always was," I said, voice almost cracking. Sitting across, I saw her look, not worry or resignation, but pure silent pride. We let it grow around us. Her hands played another note stronger. Outside, the city kept flowing, horns, children, laughter. For now, I only listened to the room, content that finally, after all the detours, I had built a place for myself and returned home.